there are people who are missing out on quality healthcare because they look like you and talk like you, but they don't see doctors like you. Application Renovation, Season 2, Episode 14. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi, Dr. Gray. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I am excited. You're welcome for having you. I'm excited to chat with you about your application, where you think you went right, where you went wrong, and really try to understand your thought process with the application before I jump in and do a deep dive in my thoughts. So talk to me about the application in terms of feedback that you've received, in terms of interviews that you've gotten. Talk to me about all of that.
Right. So I applied 2 years ago.
Okay.
And of course, I went through the whole application like everybody else. Unfortunately, I did not get any interviews. I applied late in cycle. I think about August.
June 30 or July 30th.
Right. Yes. And
Yep.
my MCAT wasn't released until later.
Yep.
So my application, I'm guessing, was not processed until that score went through.
No, let me just a clarification. So the application gets processed without the MCAT score.
Okay.
What typically happens is the medical schools won't review your application until it's complete, which includes primary application, which is what we'll look at, secondary applications, and MCAT score. So that's typically the holdup with MCAT score. All right, continue.
Okay, so unfortunately, I did not receive any interviews.
Okay.
I contacted some of the schools that I sent the applications to, and I knew that I wasn't going to get any interviews because my MCAT score was not great.
Okay.
So I was expecting that. And then I contacted the school just to receive some kind of feedback. Unfortunately, none of the schools wanted to give me any advice.
Yeah, that's unfortunately common.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so no advice. You think potentially an MCAT score, maybe a little bit of a late application. Okay, well let's dive into the application. I'll go through, tell you my thoughts, and at the end we'll answer some questions. Sound good?
Sounds great.
All right. Right off the bat, I can see on here, birthplace is Ecuador. Are you a permanent resident at this point or a citizen?
Right. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that definitely helps for just the reason I ask for students watching this is international applicants, obviously much harder to get into U.S. medical school. And permanent resident is good. So that definitely helps. All right. We go through... and we see English and Spanish here as languages. And then we get to a disadvantage essay. And I really loved your disadvantage essay here. So a couple episodes ago, we had a student who had a disadvantage essay that was mostly focused on kind of all of the hurdles, all of the obstacles, without any of the resilience and adaptability and how they overcame. And you definitely showed the obstacles and what you did to overcome. And so I think this is a great example of a disadvantaged essay. So good job with that.
Thank you.
So right off the bat, I get a little bit of kind of background on who you are, on what you've had to overcome, which is really important to help the admissions committees understand when they're looking at your GPA, when they're looking at your MCAT, when they're looking at everything else to go, what has this person had to overcome? What potential socioeconomic, what potential cultural barriers, what types of just obstacles in general are in the way of this student succeeding in a way that someone else who doesn't have obstacles potentially can succeed. So it just gives some context to the rest of your application. So good job with that. No huge red flags, which is great. We like no red flags. And we get to your grades here. And I see lots of B's, a few A's early on. It's weird, your senior classes come first on here. I don't know why that happened. Oh, that's really weird. Okay, anyway. So actually the B's are mostly senior classes. Then we get to your earlier grades, which are mostly A's, which is good. Your GPA on here, I'm assuming that the GPA kind of grid wasn't filled out, but just estimating, looking at the actual letter grades, it looks like a 3.6-ish. What was your GPA? Do you know?
Yeah, it's 3.69.
Ah, man, I'm getting good at that. All right, so 3.69, so closer to 3.7. And what's your science GPA? Is it roughly the same?
Yeah, pretty much the same. So
Okay.
I was very heavy on science classes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the one thing potentially that is concerning is that it looks like your grades were better early on, and then senior year they took a dip, which is always a concern to see a fall off at the end. So what do you think happened senior year?
Really, I think they have the same
Okay.
number. But anyway, so nothing really happened major. It was just the amount of classes that I was taking, and also I was doing my thesis.
Yeah.
So it took a lot of time.
Yeah. So just a little spread too thin.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
And I was doing research for another. Yeah, it was a lot of work.
Okay. So,
but I don't think my grades got that much of a.
Okay, it didn't dip that much as it potentially looks like. Okay, so GPA wise, pretty solid GPA, 3.69. I like that. Your MCAT scores from a 488 to a 490 to a 498. So huge improvement from test number 2 to test number 3, which is stellar. What's interesting for me is that for an ESL student, right, as a second language person, your CARS score on your second test was the highest one, which is usually completely the opposite. So that's very interesting to me. And then obviously, I'm assuming you improved all of your sections for that 498, which was your last MCAT score. So good GPA. Just missed like a good MCAT, or like a better MCAT of a 500 for some of those schools for that 500 kind of cutoff. Okay, so good job. What do you think? Let me just ask real quick. I don't really ask this, but I want to ask you.
Yeah.
Why do you think your CARS score was so much better in comparison to your other scores as an ESL student? Because most ESL students have the opposite.
Right. So yeah, I've been told that. So I think it's because I love reading.
Yeah, nice.
And also because when I moved to the States, the way that I learned how to speak English or how to read it was by reading.
Nice.
Forcing myself to read, and I think that I had to do a lot with it.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. And then what did you do to improve 8 points from test 2 to test 3?
So the biggest challenge for me was knowing what a standardized test was, because I didn't grow up with that. I mean, we don't have that type of test. So learning how to take the test, learning how to learn it, because it's a difference between knowing the material and also like making sure you know how to answer the question.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And so one of the biggest differences for you was figuring out the MCAT more, not necessarily learning the content better.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Awesome. All right. So let's look as we scroll through, going down to your activities. You have some leadership here at Mujer, a community program dedicated to, it looks like Planned Parenthood, right? Organization.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So women's health, yeah.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So leadership program there. So that looks like a good experience. A lot of the actual like description is mostly kind of what Mujer is and what it does, and not necessarily you as a person and how you impacted it. So I'd like to see some better impact there, potentially telling some stories. We have the November Project, a nice little running organization, running club that you have here for hobbies, which is good. We have your community service volunteer medical clinical experience that you have ending a month after or right after you submitted your application. Is there a reason why that experience ended right as you're submitting your application?
It did not end it. I just, I didn't see how to put it into present.
Okay.
So I put the date that I submit the application.
Yeah. So,
as the end. Yeah.
So just for clarification for everyone, step one, everyone needs to read. You have to. It's mandatory. Read the instruction manual for the application. So in the instruction manual, it'll give you instructions on you can put the date to go to the estimated start date of medical school, right? So your end date should have been 8/2019 because that's typically when most medical schools start, right? It's kind of July, August of that following year. And then you can also estimate out the hours during that time as well. Okay. So that gives a better picture that you're planning on doing it, okay? All right, so then looking at your extracurricular activities, here you have Salud, the Latinx advocate in Baltimore, good discussion there. So what I would like to see here, just to make it more impactful, is the story, right? What's the story? Show me, instead of generically talking about working with all of the kids, tell me a story of one kid. Show me your impact on that one person. Right, that's much more impactful. The research assistant that you have, obviously tons of hours here. Again, just very much job duties that you have listed here. So it doesn't show me any impact of you as a person, you on this research activity. Okay, so really show impact through stories, through numbers, through that kind of stuff. Again, you have. Go ahead.
The biggest challenge I found when filling those the activity session is like number of characters that you're allowed to.
That's what every student says, and I've worked with hundreds of students who are able to tell amazing stories in 700 characters.
In 700.
Yeah, okay. It's doable. You just have to know that you have to do it, or you should do it. I'd recommend doing it, and then you just figure out how to tell the story that quickly. So. It's doable, and I have a book, my pre-med playbook. So I have lots of pre-med playbooks, a personal statement book, an interview book. I have an application book that I'm working on that'll have the stories of like extracurricular descriptions, etc. So to hopefully help students really kind of see what those stories look like in 700 characters, even 600 characters for the ACOMAS application.
Right.
All right, going back to this next one, HHMI, Capstone Research Fellow. I'm assuming this was part of your degree. It looks a little interesting. So it's 2015. If I look at your timeline here, it's part of your senior
so that
year.
one is the interesting one because so it's not part of my degree. It's just a fellowship that I got as an undergrad.
Okay. And were you taking classes at the same time?
Right. Yes.
You were. Okay.
So I did research during the summer. Then I went back to school, and then during the breaks I would go back and continue the research. And then I wanted to continue doing the research after I graduated, so I actually went back because they award you a grant to do the capstone, what they call it. So I did the capstone, and then I stayed in the lab after that.
Okay, all right. I just what stood out to me was it looked like it was during school, and the hours that you have for these 6 or 7 months are full-time hours. So I'm like, how does that work? But if it was kind of your full-time gig, that's fine. It just stood out as something potentially.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on. You have your awards, recognitions, medical, clinical, you have listed here, but then you call it shadowing. And so remember, shadowing is not clinical experience is not shadowing. The application has its own separate shadowing category. And so listing this as clinical experience will show up very differently on the medical school systems when they're looking for how much clinical experience does someone have, how much shadowing experience, how much research experience. And so it kind of throws off their system by listing this as clinical experience, but it's really shadowing, okay?
Okay.
And so you have here listed shadowing in the care of HIV patients. I learned that as a physician, being part of a patient's story is vital to their healing. Sure, I agree with that, but it doesn't really help me understand who you are as a person. It's just a generic statement. Okay, so really you want to show your impact, you want to show who you are as a person. You have head resident of housing, so being like an RA at a school or housing. I really liked the story, right? You talk about one student in particular. Right, you're nailing not all the students, one student in particular. Okay, good story there. You can give a name to the student, put it in quotes just to kind of make it resonate, make it a little bit more memorable.
Okay.
You have your research lab, lots of hours there. And then the NIH fellow back in 2013 as well. So lots of good experience. So lots of good research experience that you have. Back to 2012, you have, so many years ago, this ADEMS or ADAMS or however you say that project and what you did there. How you wrote this was that you recorded patients' vital signs. Are you actually the one taking the vital signs? Or are you just recording them?
Actually being the person that took the vital signs.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I would, as you move forward, right, recording vital signs is different than actually like taking them. So just a little bit of a language change there to help me understand a little bit more. And then again, potentially, right, telling a story of just one of those patients would do a better job of showing that connection, showing that impact on the job, and not just I recorded vital signs or I took vital signs.
Gotcha.
Okay. And then you have the president, co-founder, biology chemistry club. At the super cliche statement of passion and curiosity for scientific research, right? Just front and center. So no cliche statements as much as possible in an application. I like the impact that you have here where you're showing, right? I during my time as president, I grew the club from 10 members to 24 in the first year. So show more of that impact, show more of those numbers, and that's a much better way to show impact, especially in that sort of leadership position. Okay?
Sounds good.
Education rights advocates that you have listed here, so good stuff here. Again, you have a potential story here of Jose. You show some impact and mentored a group of 6 students, right? As much as you can, focus on one person, one student, show that story, tell that story. It'll be much more impactful. Phi Theta Kappa Honor Society, again, impact as the vice president of this, again, like you did with the pre-med club or biomedical club. Did you grow members? Did you increase philanthropic opportunities? Did you increase like donations of stuff? Did you hold events? How many people, etc. Right? Show that impact.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
All right. So looking back, right? So that was a quick glance through. Looking through clinical experiences, which is always what I like to focus on because it's almost always what students are lacking, is you have clinical experience here from this Agape. Is that how you say that? The Agape Clinic?
Yes, Agape Clinic.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So you have the Agape Clinic, which ideally would have shown that it was continued. So mm-hmm. That's good that you were doing that. I like that. Doing the vitals and glucose tests and scribing, etc. So that's all great experience. I really like that. You have listed here shadowing, which is good. It's old, I would say. I would like to see more recent shadowing. You are doing kind of shadowing by scribing and stuff at the Agape Clinic. But outside of that, really old stuff with the Project 8Ms. So yeah, so potentially maybe a lack of clinical experience, lack of shadowing, just at a glance, because it looks like the clinical experience at Agape stopped, even though it didn't. So
right.
Potentially something to show.
Right. Yes.
Okay. And even it's one of those things, as we're recording this in February. Oh, but this was 2 years ago, the application.
That was 2 years ago, yes.
So never mind. I was going to say it could be something where you send a letter to a school, an update letter to say, I understand that it may be a lack of clinical experience, may be hurting my application. I continue to volunteer at Agape this many hours, etc. So, all right, getting to the personal statement. What I see here is this run as fast as you can and hide. So very interesting, very active opening, which is good. I like that. But then what you're saying is, I'm going to run away and hide from the doctor. So that's a very interesting, like, I want to be a doctor, but I hate doctors, right? And of course, a lot of kids obviously don't like needles and shots and stuff.
Right.
So that makes sense. The next thing you talked about here is focusing on this white coat stranger, right? Like the white coat stranger, I wanted to be able to help my community by providing the healthcare they needed. But the initial, like, run as fast as you can and hide, then you're saying, I want to run away from the doctor, I want to be the doctor. It didn't really jive as well as I think you wanted it to.
So there was a disconnect, you're saying?
There was a disconnect there between I like the action and kind of the motion of running and hiding and doing that stuff as a kid, but then to go, I want to be one of those doctors. I didn't feel connected to why you wanted to feel like one of those doctors. You just wanted to run away, and you still call them a white coat stranger. So it's still negative towards the doctor. I want to be a stranger, right? So there was that disconnect there. Your family immigrated to New Jersey. I don't like the term migrated. I think is used more for like animals. Humans immigrate and emigrate, right? Just the term migrate in itself is used more towards like the pack of like wildebeest in Africa migrated from one place to another. So it's a very common for immigrants to just say immigrate, right? So just something that stood out. And then the selling, right? I think most people would understand that to immigrate to a foreign country, to a new place where language is different, culture is different, that takes a lot. And so you don't need to then sell me and say, it took us courage, resilience, and determination to relearn, reimagine, and recreate ourselves, right? I think that's a given. You don't need to sell me on that. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. I did feel that I needed to say it, but
no, you don't. You don't need to say it. Okay. That's telling. I want you to show me.
Okay.
Telling me that you immigrated. Sure. Okay. Telling me that you immigrated to the States already tells me a lot about you. Now, if you think you have to have some of this resilience and determination in your personal statement, which I would argue you don't need because it has nothing to do with why you want to be a doctor. You're just focused on it because you think I need to show resilience and determination because that's what doctors need to have, right? That's too much of the sales pitch of I think I have the skills and traits necessary to be a doctor versus this is why I want to be a doctor. Does that make sense?
That makes sense.
Okay. Mm-hmm. You talked about the lived experiences that you've had instilled. You had a typo there, it said installed, but instilled in me a need to pursue medicine to not only serve my community, but also to change the systems that reinforce inequalities in healthcare. It makes sense coming from your background being an immigrant, being part of an immigrant community, that you see a lot of these inequalities in care. Most people with their eyes wide open see the inequalities of care. Those, in my mind, aren't reasons for wanting to be a doctor. Those are what you want to do as a physician. I would argue that a lot of people can have a bigger effect on helping inequalities by going into policy, by going into being a politician, and changing healthcare from that side of it. And so when you talk a lot about what you want to do as a physician, and I still don't really understand why you want to be a physician, you're missing the point of the personal statement, okay? It's a grand thing, and I think you could have potentially put that at the end in a conclusion about what you hope to accomplish, but I still need to understand why do you want to be a doctor, okay? I'm not there yet. All right, and then we get to talking about pursuing your education and understanding your own strengths. You talk about founding the biology chemistry club, challenging yourself, right? So you're talking a lot about your skills and your traits, and look how determined I am and motivated I am, and look at all these things that I'm doing. And most of this paragraph I have listed here is just their activities, right? The biology chemistry club, exchange program in the Dominican where you volunteered at a hospital. All of these are activities that aren't why do you want to be a doctor? It's just stuff that you've done, right?
Okay.
And those are in your activity list already, for the most part.
So I need to show a better way of saying this is why.
Yep. You need to,
I want to.
If you haven't read my book on how to write a personal statement, that's where I would start, is really focusing on your story as to why you're doing this. You have the story here of being in Haiti, it looks like, or in the Dominican with a Haitian patient, I think, yeah, because the DR and Haiti are next to each other, right, on the same island?
Yes.
So you have this kind of HIV culture, kind of ignorance about how to spread HIV and getting HIV, et cetera. So you have this story here. I love stories, so good sense of that. But the kind of take-home message isn't really there, right? You have this experience of being able to hold the hand of an HIV patient, even after the nurse is like, don't touch them, right? And saying experiences like this have been instrumental to your desire to pursue medicine. That's what? Okay, so it's an experience, it's instrumental, but why? Why is it instrumental? So it's missing the really good reflection about why. And you say, medicine represents 3 of my biggest interests and passions: advocating, learning, and caring for others. Okay, so you're saying, hey, I want to advocate, I want to learn, and I want to care for others. My hope is that the majority of your focus in a personal statement is focused on patient care, right? And right now you're saying it's 1/3 of my care. It's 1/3 of what I want to do. I actually like the sentence. I actually highlighted it in yellow. I would think it's more of a conclusion than the main focus of why you want to be a doctor. Okay? So again, the what do you want to do as a physician is different than why do you want to be a physician. Okay? Again, talking about volunteering and shadowing, and you say their experiences taught me that providing care is not simply associated with hospitals and clinics, but encompasses the daily lives and lived experiences of others. Okay, it's just another very generic kind of statement. It's true, I agree with it, but it doesn't really help me understand who you are and why you're doing this. You're just kind of regurgitating, this is what I learned, this is what I learned, okay. Right? Mm-hmm. So those stories. I really loved your conclusion here. I think it could have been a little bit better potentially with some of those other things that I said could go in the conclusion versus being up above. But I really liked your kind of aspirational thought process here of, as a medical student, I want to continue to prepare myself further. As a non-traditional student, I hope to bring my perspective and to positively impact fellow students, right? Lots of good aspirational thoughts and ideas there with your conclusion. So it's still missing the kind of like, why are you doing this, other than you want to be a white coat stranger? Because that's how it kind of started off, which just didn't really connect for me, but then finished pretty strong. So I think if we are able to take some of those stories, better frame them in terms of, here's the impact that I had, here's the kind of emotional connection I've had, and maybe it's from an advocating standpoint as well, potentially, but then reflecting on those stories in a better way to show the reader why that experience made you want to be a physician.
Okay. Yes.
Makes sense?
That's a lot. I thought, you work on the personal statement and it seems like it's coming out great, but then you have your feedback and it changes the whole perspective, or like what they're looking for, what you should be concentrating on. Yeah. So what happened, I think it was, I wanted to submit the application. So I submitted the application with that personal statement, and I didn't before I met with you. So I don't think the changes included that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And I probably maybe give you different feedback last time we chatted too, because my yes, thoughts and my ideas and processes are always changing and hopefully improving. Okay. And then looking at the school list, it's very short, right? Only 3 schools, so 2 in Jersey and then Hopkins as well. And it was a second application, so this was your second time applying? Correct, yes. Mm-hmm. Okay. Because the first one I applied with the other MCAT score, first MCAT. Yep. Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Yeah, so for me, MCAT is definitely one of the things that could be improved. The school list, why so few schools? Because I knew that if I got a low score, I didn't want to spend that much money applying to other schools. If I knew that the score was not what I needed it. Yeah. All right, that makes sense. So you got your score back after you submitted. So you just submitted to a couple schools, waited for your score. I'm not going to add any more schools. Right. Mm-hmm. Okay, that makes sense. Okay, so again, for me, it looks like you're getting some good clinical experience. I would get some more shadowing potentially if you can. It looks like maybe you have access to shadow based on the Agape Clinic, where you're getting some clinical experience. Take those experiences and really flush out the stories that are motivating you behind doing this. Try to reframe and reconnect the initial seed of why you want to be a physician, and really help the reader understand your journey here. So after I submitted my application, I decided to do a master's program. Why? And I moved back to New Jersey. Why did you do a master's program? Because it's a linkage program. And I wanted to apply to the school that... Yeah. Okay. Okay. Talk to me how it's going. So the MCAT score keeps being a problem. Yep. And what's the minimum for the linkage? They don't have a minimum. They say they don't have a minimum. That's what, when I applied. But they do, unfortunately. So what happens is, like, if you do well, you take classes with the medical school, and then if you do well, within like the 10%, they select you to do the application process, which I did. Like I got selected. Mm-hmm. But then they review all the application, including the MCAT and all of that. And then if you don't have the MCAT score, unfortunately, you can continue in the process of applying. Yeah. What have your grades been in the master's program? 4.0. Yeah. So to me, and this is what frustrates me, which is why I was like, why did you do a master's program? To me, all you did was waste your money, unfortunately. You've proven yourself GPA-wise that you can handle medical school. With a 3.69 GPA, a 4.0 in a master's program is not going to show them any different. It should. It should. If you're taking classes with medical students, they should go, holy crap, I want you in my class, right? Your diversity, you're a Latina woman, like, be in my class, please help me, right? And not just from a diversity standpoint, but especially being in New Jersey, like, there are people who are missing out on quality healthcare because they look like you and talk like you, but they don't see doctors like you. And for a medical school to go, yeah, but your MCAT score, it pisses me off that's why they're saying no to you when academically you've proven yourself. The MCAT score is a stupid test. It's an important test, but it's stupid, especially for an immigrant. We know that the MCAT is terrible when it comes to African American students and Latinx students, right? We have data that shows you score lower on those tests, unfortunately. And yet for a medical school to go, yeah, no, 4.0, great job, thank you for your money, see you later. So yeah, so unfortunately a waste of money. I would have told you not to do a master's program. It's not worth it. You should have better spent your money preparing for the MCAT in a better way.
So this is where the story becomes interesting because unfortunately that's something that I cannot change now.
Why not?
Have you
taken it 7 times?
No. I wasn't aware that there was a specific number of, and that's my fault on my part. I take full responsibility for it. That I wasn't aware that there was a limit of how many times you can take.
Oh, so you have taken the limit.
The MCAT. I have taken the MCAT 3 times, but I signed up for more than that.
Oh. You've signed up and voided it?
And either didn't attend it or voided it.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Because I didn't feel prepared. Unfortunately, you can cancel it within like a certain date.
Yeah. So for someone watching this, maximum of 7 times now. There's a certain maximum for a number of times in a year, 2 years, etc. So you've shot yourself in the foot. There's nothing we can do about it. Have you applied to DO schools?
So that's my next step. That's my goal right now. I did not apply in the previous application.
Okay. Why not?
So now my goal is to apply to as many schools, within my range or within.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So for you, I would, as much as possible. Are you applying this coming cycle as we're recording this in February of 2020?
Exactly.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So for you, you're on the East Coast. I would go in April to the AMSA convention and get in front of as many medical schools as possible and really share your story and say, I got a 4.0 at Rutgers, I'm assuming was the master's program.
Right.
I got a 4.0 mm-hmm. at this master's program. I have a 3.69 undergraduate GPA.
Right.
My MCAT score is just suffering at a 498. I can't change it. I can't take it anymore. I messed up there. Please give me a shot, right? Like, how can I get on the desk of someone? I would reach out to, as much as possible, to the diversity and inclusion offices at different medical schools.
Right.
And just advocate the heck out of yourself or for yourself.
So how do you put yourself out there in terms of saying, like, this is my application, but here's one thing.
So for me, that's exactly what you do. You go and you say, hey, like, I want to go to medical school. I immigrated to this country at whatever age. I did pretty well in undergrad, 3.69 GPA, but the MCAT has always held me back. And I improved from a 490 to a 498, but unfortunately that was the last attempt that I had because I registered and skipped a lot because I just wasn't ready to take the MCAT. And unfortunately with the new limit or with the limit, I can't take it anymore. And I got a 4.0 right in my master's program. I've proven that I can do this. I took classes with medical students. And you really just need to lay it out there and just get in front of them and say, hey, look at me. Like I'm a normal person. Right. I'm a great person. You want to accept me. I think that's what you're going to have to do. And you're going to have to talk to enough people to really show them who you are. The 4.0 just will immensely help. Rutgers and Robert Wood Johnson are big poo-poo heads for only looking at your MCAT score and rejecting you for that reason. It's just a disgrace, unfortunately. That's all I can say. But yeah, That's what you do. You go, so AMSA convention in DC in April, be there, shake some hands. I unfortunately won't be there this year.
Oh no!
But it's something that I think
I was looking
definitely help
forward to meeting you in person.
So I would plan on the AMSA convention, and then I would also plan on coming out to the UC Davis conference at UC Davis in October. I will be there. And then potentially a third one, typically in November every year, is the AAMC Minority Fair, which I would 1,000% look at going to as well. Okay, those three, I would start saving, plan on going to those. The Minority Fair obviously is a little bit more of a fit. I told the story of a student who had a 499 MCAT score, had decent GPA, former nurse, who went to the UC Davis conference, talked to a lot of people, went to the Minority Fair, and actually got 2 interviews from that with their 499, 2 interviews at MD schools, and got 2 acceptances from those interviews. So you're going to have to advocate for yourself at this point.
Okay. Yeah, I think I've been trying to do it. I've been trying to reach out to schools.
Yeah.
But it's hard to do it through email. I think it's better to do it in person because you can. In person
is very
meet the
good.
face of it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, hopefully this will set you up for success in the future. Please reach out if I can help in any way. And I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you so much. Still being hopeful.
Yeah, I'm glad that you're still hopeful, right? And that goes back to being an immigrant and all of the resilience and determination for being an immigrant that come with that. So keep it up.
Thank you.